Talking Men
with Matt Webb.
Cambridge 105 Radio.
So welcome back to Talking Men. It's Matt Webb with you through until 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome to the airways of Cambridge 105 Radio the Director of Communications at the Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them Party. It's Elizabeth Hobson. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So just tell us a bit about Justice for Men and Boys and what the party is and what you do.
Sure. The political party was set up in 2013 by our leader, Mike Buchanan. Our primary focus is actually on male genital mutilation or circumcision of male minors, which we have discovered is actually against the law in the UK under the Offences Against the Person Act 1861. And there are no exemptions for cultural or religious reasons, and yet obviously, as we all know, it does still go on. Mike has written many freedom of information requests to Home Secretaries and so forth, asking for clarification on the legal status, which are mostly ignored. He's also run protests outside Conservative Party conferences for the last 3 years and outside of clinics, outside of Parliament. He did stop traffic at one point, which got him a slap on the wrist. And we also campaign on sort of many areas facing men and boys. There is the denial of access to children, domestic violence, like we've just heard about, sexual abuse, paternity fraud. There's discrimination in the criminal justice system. We try to raise awareness about all of these things.
Do you find it very difficult? Because often in the political environment, the narrative is normally towards women and girls. Have you found it very difficult as a political party getting a footing in mainstream politics and getting your message across?
Oh, certainly. We found it very difficult getting a footing in politics. Yeah, we stood some candidates in 2015. We don't have any candidates. We never have yet. Last general election, because of the nature of it being a snap general election, we didn't have time to get our candidates together. Hopefully we will for the next one, we'll see. But, you know, I mean, even the Women's Equality Party found it very difficult. They haven't got any MPs either. So I think the nature of these kind of focused groups makes it quite difficult. I mean, if we had proportional representation, it might be a different kind of situation, but as it stands, yes, that's difficult. But because we're a political party, we, you know, provoke a certain amount of interest, and so we get access to platforms so we can raise the issues at least.
And some of those issues you've already touched upon are things that we don't necessarily hear about. Male genital mutilation is what you've touched upon, male circumcision. The areas that you're campaigning on, have you had a lot of interest in people supporting you and sort of sympathising with what you're doing? And I think more importantly, joining your party or political group because they believe in what you're doing? Yeah,
we're fully funded by donations and we have lots of members. We also, you know, I mean, I tend to find that when I talk to people about these issues, you know, I mean, I was quite reluctant to talk to, because I'm a mum, I was reluctant to talk to the other mums at school about what I do. But as I've got to know them better, things have been coming out and I've been really surprised how supportive they actually are. And although they might not have considered the kind of issues that I'm talking about, when I explain the facts to them, they're actually very open and they become concerned as well.
So what got you interested in men's issues then? Because I have to admit, it's very rare to hear a female talk about issues that affect men. I know there are women out there who do it, but speaking so openly about it can be quite rare.
I think, you know, some people are born with an instinctive kind of concern for justice and equality, and I was one of them. But, you know, as a young person growing up, I was misinformed by the education that I got, by friends and family, you know, who misinformed me out of ignorance. In all fairness to them, I don't blame them for it. Also politicians and non-governmental organisations like the UN, who concentrates very heavily on women and girls and not at all on boys ever. And I became pregnant. My partner and I became pregnant when I was 19, and I suddenly felt this kind of bond with all of motherkind, and I was watching nature documentaries about animal mothers, and I started identifying as a feminist and reading feminist literature and going to events with feminists in real life and engaging with them online. And it didn't take long before I started to realise that actually the dictionary definition of feminism, which is about the equality of the sexes, really bears no resemblance to what feminism really is in practice. And while I was online debating these kind of issues with feminists, I started coming across men's rights activists and anti-feminists and people from the other side of the debate. And they opened my eyes to all of these issues that men and boys face that I'd never considered. I had no, I didn't know about.
And they're very serious issues as well.
They are very serious issues. The male genital mutilation one, it's so clear. I mean, we've had the big campaign against female genital mutilation, and it's so obvious to everybody in the country that bodily integrity and autonomy is a fundamental right when it comes to girls. And yet people are a bit confused about that issue when it comes to boys, and the issue of the denial of access to children for fathers is absolutely critically important for the men, for the children, for the whole of society.
Yeah, a lot of people have messaged me in the past and have said that the topic, a lot of people will often not speak about men's issues because they're scared to raise their head above the parapet because they might get attacked. They might be called a misogynist or something like that. Have you seen that when other men have spoken about issues that affect them? I mean, some people might say that claiming that someone is a misogynist, they might be a misandrist by trying to shut down the conversation. That's what some people have said. I've seen that on social media. Is that something that you've come across as well?
Oh yeah, I see it all the time. I mean, one of my favourite people in the world is Neil Linden, who wrote an article in 1990 for The Times called Bad Mouthing, and it was the first article in the modern mainstream media that criticised feminism and also itemised issues facing men and boys, and that provoked a real backlash from feminists, including some of the female reporters at the Times. And it didn't stop him from publishing his 1992 treatise, No More Sex War, which argued for, equality for men and women. And
the egalitarian approach, as a lot of people say.
Indeed, yeah. And for that, he ended up bankrupt. He lost his house. He eventually lost access to his son for many years. And so, yeah, it can be very serious, and it does happen. And it's incessant for the men in the movement, being called a misogynist. It's, for some of them it's water off a duck's back, but for others, they're worried about losing their jobs and they're worried about social ostracism because, for people who are uninitiated in gender politics, if they hear that someone is a misogynist, they're going to think, God, that's really bad. I won't have anything to do with that person. If you know a little bit more about it, then you might think, actually, maybe there's something more to this.
And something else that the Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them Party has been involved in is the International Conference for Men's Issues. Is
Indeed,
that right?
That's
now,
right.
you spoke at that earlier this year. You covered a whole range of different topics. One of them was men and women in the criminal justice system. But you also covered a whole host of other issues. Just tell us what those were, because I think a lot of men who are listening might have a bit of sympathy in what you were saying.
Oh, my goodness. It's a long time ago now. Can you help me out here?
Yeah, I'll try.
So I started by defining feminism as a hate movement, which is full of misandry and always has been, a supremacy movement, because it campaigns entirely now not for equal rights for women, but actually for privileges for women, and as a I can't remember what the other...
I can't remember either, actually, from watching the video.
And then, I went on to discuss how feminism attacks justice. And so we're looking at the kind of disparities in sentencing in the criminal justice system and the Me Too movement, which has led to these witch hunts and lost people, jobs, and led to 4 suicides, in fact, one of which was actually a woman. And I discussed, let me think...
You got a range of interesting questions at the end. There was one person who came up with a very controversial thing. I can't quite remember what it was now. Something else that actually struck me, because obviously you've also been involved in the Ladies for Philip Davis group, haven't you?
Yes, that was me too.
So this was when you were part of the Liberty Bells, is that right?
Yes.
And you interviewed Philip Davis. Now, if people don't know who Philip Davis is, he is the Conservative MP for Shipley. He's tabled a number of International Men's Day debates to happen in the House of Commons, and you had the privilege of interviewing him and meeting him, and he had quite a whole plethora of things to say. But he says that I think it was along the lines of, he likes to stand up for unfashionable causes.
Indeed.
So are we trying to say that the men's issues is a bit of an unfashionable cause still? I don't know if it changing?
I think it is changing, yeah. I think that it's a generational thing, actually. I think that kind of older people who have always watched mainstream media and taken all of that in are very much pro-feminist, are very kind of misinformed in the way I was discussing that I was, and don't really have any counter-information. But young people are increasingly turning to alternative media sources and YouTube, and are picking things up, picking up counter-arguments. And actually the keynote speaker, in fact, at the International Conference on Men's Issues was Karen Strawn, and she was talking about how it's women's job to consign feminism to the dustbin of history. And one of the things that she mentioned was that it's going to happen, as more and more women join, it will become a sort of fashionable cause, and it will go from strength to strength. So I hope that's true. And I hope we can retain Philip Davies' support even once we're there.
We've talked about this before, actually, that the International Men's Day debates in Parliament, do you think they are important to getting men's issues onto the main stage?
Oh, yeah, they are critically important. And also for exposing what people really think. We were talking earlier, weren't we, about the MP who suggested that there wasn't any problem with fathers being denied access to their children. Which was that MP again?
It was words to that effect. I think it was Diana Cherry, who's one of the SNP MPs. This was in the International Men's Day debate, not last year, the year before, in the main chamber of the House of Commons. There is videos online if you want to watch it. Yeah,
which I would encourage you to. Unfortunately, this year we don't have a full debate. It looks like we're going to, hopefully get half an hour's questioning from Jeremy Lefroy to Penny Mordaunt, who's a minister.
That's on Friday, isn't it?
That's on Friday, very last thing of the day. So I am quite worried that it's not going to go ahead, but we'll see.
Let's hope it does. And finally, I suppose being a political party it can be quite difficult. You've been on a couple of radio stations for interviews. This is your first in the studio interview. How have the media reacted to a party like the Justice for Men and Boys coming along? Have they been supportive?
No, largely not. We've had a few smear pieces written about us, and yeah, I think it seems to me like there's been a development in the last sort of 5 years, because when I started changing my views and sort of critiquing feminism and asking questions, like feminists on Twitter, say, would respond to me. And it feels like they've got wise to the fact that when they respond to people in our community, and our community is, backed up with facts and evidence, they don't come out very, very well of these engagements. And so now they seem to be trying to ignore us as much as is humanly possible, which is quite frustrating.